Hi, friends. This is Will Parker back with my co-host, Dr. Jen Schwanke, for another episode of Principal Matters. Oh, this is episode 479, Jen, where I interviewed Danny Steele, who's a legend in school leadership. I have followed him on social media for years and years, and then I got to meet him this summer at a national conference. We got to have dinner together, then I invited him on the show. And so you guys are going to love this conversation, but we're going to do a Q&A here for a second, Jen. But sometimes before we start recording, I start talking about things and I can't stop. I have to keep talking about it with you. So I was asking Jen, I was like, hey, Jen, have you ever watched The Incredibles? And you said you had.
I said no.
Yeah, and I was getting ready to tell you, and I was like, I'll just record it, that it's my favorite of all time of animations because I love it's the mom and the dad dynamic with the kids, and but they also have all these stereotypes of heroes that are so funny. But there's this, the beginning scene of the whole thing is the mom and the dad, you flash back to when they were getting married, and the day of their marriage, the dad guy, who's the hero, is in his car and he's running around the city, saving people. And every time he saves someone, he'll look at his watch to see how close he is to getting to the church, and he'll go, oh, we got time. And he'll go do another. And so right before we were recording, because you and I record in batches, I was looking at the clock and I was like, oh, we got time. We can do another. We can do another. Time. So Jen, here's a question that actually you and I have gotten this question before, but it's not really a leadership question, but it's one that I think you and I probably get a lot from individuals interested in their own, possibly writing their own books. And so we only get 5 minutes here. What are your practices for writing a book? Because people ask me that. Like, so what do you go through, Will? What do you go through, Jen?
Well, first, let me tell any listeners who are going to the AASA, that's the Superintendent's Panel in Nashville in February, I will be talking about this at a panel with some other authors. And what do I go through? Well, I get an idea, and then I sit down and I word vomit every single thing I can think about that, and then I edit it. So since we only have 5 minutes, that is the, what's the word? Like criminally simplified version. But it starts with the idea. It is, you have to have something to say. A lot of times people will say to me, how do you write a book? I want to write a book. And I'm like, great. What do you want to write a book about? That's the problem. There's no answer to that.
No, that's a very good answer for a short space of time. And I'm hesitating I'm thinking back to a couple of episodes ago where I realized I used a profanity, and I'm thinking about another one here. But I'm just going to be, this is an adult audience.
You have not ever used profanity.
So Anne Lamott likes to say, if you're going to write a book, be okay with shitty first script drafts.
Right. She does say that.
Yeah,
yes.
Yeah. So I'm just going to say that because that was so helpful for me to hear somebody who's such an accomplished author to just say, it's going to be horrible. Just write what you're thinking. Get it out on a page, vomit on that page, and then go back later and clean up. Because if you're trying to make it perfect as you're writing, it's never going to be. I'll say for me, Jen, whenever I get the idea of the thing I want to write about next, I have to do a brain dump. I just have to sit down and just dump, and it's just like get out every possible thing I would want to say about that topic. And often that will be in bullets, or for me, just filling up a page. And then I'll go back and look for themes. What are the things? Could that be a chapter? Could this be a chapter? And I'll try to create those themes. And then once I have that, then I can start creating an outline of what I think it's going to look like. Now, you and I both know, depending on if you're working with an editor or a proofer or a team, because I've done 3 different kinds of publishing: self-publishing, small firm publishing, large firm publishing. And so each of them has different dynamics. Even when I've self-published now, I will always hire somebody to proof what I'm doing. Or even if I'm working with another person who's going to be editing, I get somebody to help me proof, because that part is the hardest part. And I would rather just be able to get the words out and wordsmith it as well as I can, and then someone else can catch my mistakes and then give it back to me in that process too. So for me, brain dumping, outlining, writing, and then having someone else's help for proofing has been helpful in my process of writing.
Right. Well, and if you're watching this video, you just saw me grab my pen and write something down. I wrote down Bird by Bird. That is a wonderful book by Anne Lamott. And how she tells this is about big projects. This helps me with writing. It's about her brother who was overwhelmed with a school project about birds, and her father told her brother, "Just do bird by bird, buddy. Just bird by bird." And what I would say to writers is page by page. You do not have to write a book the first time you sit down. Be okay with those first drafts that are terrible. Be okay with no structure, but start with the idea and then go from there.
Well, and then the last thing I'll add is in disciplines vary for every person, but I have had to build into my calendar time to write. And it doesn't mean I always do it, but even the posts that I share with you, Jen, or that we put on, or the newsletters you write, they don't, they tip, I'm going to speak for you, but you can correct me. They don't happen because you intend for them to happen. They happen because you've actually schedule time for them to happen.
Right.
And so if you look at my calendar, you'll see a couple of blocks during the week where I'm just scheduling time. If I'm working on a book, I try to schedule time every single day that I can just focus on getting enough words down so that I'm to that next place I want to be. And I know that's different from person to person. What is that like for you?
Well, like you said, it's different from person to person. I think it's different book to book too.
Yeah, that's
every one of my books. I've published 6 times now with ASCD, and every time felt a little bit different. And sometimes it was because I had to get it all out. I knew what I was going to say. Other times I'm like, I need to step back. I don't really know what I'm going to say next. So it depends. Yeah.
Yeah. I heard a funny story of a guy who was working on a book and he couldn't find the time like to get away where people weren't distracting him. And I don't even remember his name. I just thought this is so funny. I wanted to wrap it with this. He booked a flight to Tokyo from LA round trip. But he didn't go to Tokyo. He just wrote the whole time. He was on the plane.
Not a bad idea.
And he wrote the whole time on the way back, and he got it done. The thing that he wanted, that part that he wanted finished. And I was like, that's a really expensive way to get yourself alone. But but sometimes I've had to do that too, especially when I had young kids. I would have to go literally hide someplace and get permission to block that time off and just use it. Well, Jen, I'm sure we've gone over 5 minutes, but thank you for sharing that. And Danny Steele, we can't wait to share you with the world. But until next time, Principal Matters listeners, thank you for doing what matters, and we'll talk to you again soon. Let's take a moment to thank our sponsors, and then we'll be right back. Everyone talks about the power of data-driven instruction, but how do you actually get the right results and know the best next steps? The secret is iExcel. iExcel helps you easily assess performance and determines the best path forward for each student. Whether you need data for benchmarking or intervention planning, iExcel can do it all. And iExcel doesn't stop at assessments. It also provides you with everything else your school needs, from a standards-aligned K-12 curriculum to actionable analytics. iExcel's online learning and teaching platform is research proven to improve student outcomes, and it's used by 95 of the top 100 U.S. school districts. If you want to start driving real progress, get started today at iExcel.com/PM.
You're listening to Principal Matters, the School Leaders Podcast.
Hi, friends. It's Will Parker, host of Principal Matters, the School Leaders Podcast, where each week we bring you inspiring, innovative, and imaginative ideas for your own school leadership. And this week, oh my goodness, I get to talk to Danny Steele about his new book, The Instructional Leader in You, 10 Strategies for Every School Leader. Danny Steele has worked in education for 31 years as a principal, assistant principal, teacher, coach, assistant professor, instructional leader. In 2005, he was recognized as the assistant principal of the year in the state of Alabama. And in 2016, he was recognized as Alabama's secondary principal of the year. He's written 6 books, including 2 with Todd Whitaker, and has presented at numerous state and national conferences, spoken in school districts around the country. And he has an undergraduate degree in history from Covenant College, a master's in history from the University of Alabama in Birmingham, and a doctorate in educational leadership from Samford University. The father of 3 mostly grown children, he resides with his wife in Birmingham, Alabama. Danny, I followed you for years on Twitter, And you're one of those people that every time you say something, I'm like, uh-huh, yeah, yeah, yeah. Thanks for saying that, Danny. Welcome to Principal Matters Podcast. Why don't you fill in the gaps on that intro and tell listeners something else they may be surprised to know about you?
Well, I really appreciate you having me on here. It's an honor to speak with you today. Um, I I have always liked to make words rhyme, and I remember, when I was in high school and I was bored or finished my work, I would write little poems. And so then as a young adult, I began writing raps for kids. And so that surprises a lot of people to know that I've written some raps that I've done for students and teachers. Yeah, that catches people off guard.
Oh, okay. I won't put you on the spot, but if there's a video out there of you rapping that you'd like to share with listeners, then we can include it in the show notes, Danny. But it doesn't surprise me a bit that you love to have fun while you're leading, and that there's a reason that your students and your teachers in your communities were high achieving schools. Um, but what are you doing now? Because listeners may also know you from watching your work over the years as a principal. But tell us what's been going on with you currently, before we jump into your new book.
So, I retired this past summer a year ago. And so this year has kind of been a process of me figuring out my next chapter. I was ready to hand off the principal baton and do something different, but I still have a lot of energy and I still have a lot of passion for the great work that school leaders are doing and teachers. So I've been doing a few things. I've been mentoring some first year principals through our state association. I've been doing a little bit of leadership coaching. Been working on a new book, which we'll talk about in a little bit. It's with the editors now. My main focus over the last 6 months has been to sort of grow my connections, around the country, um, trying to network with folks and look for ways to add value to school districts outside of Alabama.
Well, I've had the privilege of not just following your work and seeing the things that you're doing now as you're working with schools across the U.S., but we got to sit together back in the summer at the United Schools Conference with NASSP and NAESP, and got to do a dinner together, got to meet your lovely wife. And Danny, I've actually been telling this story to other people. It was so cool to sit at that table. There was a principal who was transitioning in from an AP to his new role, and you guys were all sharing feedback with him on just ways to be prepared. And I asked your wife, what would you say as the spouse of a school leader? And she gave such practical advice. I've been sharing it with other leaders that, one, share your schedule so that your partner or spouse knows where you are and what you're doing. And two, she said, share the why of your work with the people, with your spouse or partner, because sometimes understanding the why behind a certain situation you're dealing with really helps them to be able to encourage you. I ran that question by my wife, by the way, and she said, and she agreed with both of those. She said she would add one more thing, which was, when you come home, take off the principal hat and please be husband and father. And so I can't tell you the number of times she's had to stop me and go, whoa, 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 that's Principal Will. I need, I need Will. I need husband Will. And so, yeah. So any other things you would add to that conversation?
Well, yeah, and that is a great memory. You were so gracious to take us to dinner, and you did a great job of sort of helping this like the six of us stay connected. And so that is a great memory. Um, yeah, I would definitely agree with what your wife said. I mean, there were times where my wife has said, "Danny, I'm not one of your teachers. Like, don't treat this situation like I'm on your faculty." Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, good stuff. Well, listen, for those, let me say this on the front end because we can share this at the very end too. But this recording will be coming out mid-December because we were able to record guests in advance, Danny. So your book will probably be ready to be seen by then. And so, and also, I want people to be able to visit your website, leadershiplearningandculture.com. And so let's set the stage. In this new book, The Instructional Leader in You, 10 Strategies for Every School Leader, People will need to read the book if they want to unpack deeply all 10 strategies. But I do want to give you the opportunity to talk about what motivated you to write this book. And then I'd love to be able to just kind of talk about some of those strategies and maybe dig deep into one or two of them. So, first of all, what motivated you to write this book, Danny?
That's a great question. I thought over the years that there was going to be the chance I might write a leadership book, but it really still catches me off guard that that leadership book is on instructional leadership. Because to be candid, I never really thought that that was my niche. I never felt like a great instructional leader. And so part of what inspired this book is that I I was always intimidated by that concept of instructional leadership. I felt like as a school leader, I had that up on a pedestal, and like to be the instructional leader, you have to have a PhD in curriculum instruction. You got to know all the latest pedagogy. You've got to know how to disaggregate all the data. You've got to know the latest brain research. You've got to be able to lead your faculty through all the PLCs. You have to go into classrooms regularly and know all the look fors and provide all that meaningful feedback in a timely manner. Like, and principals are just trying to make it through their day, right? We're oftentimes running from one fire to the next. So it was overwhelming and intimidating. Um, but the other part of kind of what inspired me is last summer I was just starting my first having my first experience working with a couple of young principals as a leadership coach. And the superintendent told me, he's like, okay, like these are young principals. One of them was a history teacher, he was a coach. The other was a PE teacher, he was a coach. So they're going to be great, but I really need you to try to build some instructional leadership capacity because they're kind of at ground zero there. So after spending my first day with them, I came away realizing that they were really kind of selling themselves short. Because they had amazing relationships with their teachers and it was a pretty strong culture. The teachers didn't yet see them as instructional leaders, but their teachers trusted them because of the rapport that they had built with their teachers. So I'm like, guys, like if you've got great relationships with your teachers, you're 95% of the way there. Like that's the heavy lifting. So I started thinking if you can just leverage some basic strategies and have some little embrace some new mindsets and some shifts in your thinking, you can really move the needle with teaching and learning and student achievement. And so it was that experience with them is what made me want to try to articulate what these strategies or mindsets are. It started off as a blog post, and then I sent it to the editor. I'm like, I think, can you think this could be a book? And she's like, yeah. So that was kind of what got the ball rolling.
Oh, I love that. And you're so right that sometimes I can't tell you the number of leaders that have told me they have imposter syndrome where they're like, I know the kind of leader I wanted leading me, or I've seen it modeled. Sometimes it's rare to have seen it modeled, and other times you've seen the complete opposite. So a leader will step in and they'll be like, okay, I know what I want. I wanted to receive in leadership from my principal, but yet you're usually an expert in the thing you did. So that maybe that's third grade, or maybe that was ninth grade English, or maybe that was science and coaching, or whatever it is. And so then the idea of I'm going to need to provide support and feedback to people that teach every subject and every elective and every grade level, or whatever it is that you're asked to do. And so, Danny, bringing it back to, well, 95% of the preparation is can you build meaningful, trusting relationships so that you then can provide the feedback necessary for people to grow is such a foundation. But I know you've also taken this now, and what began as just a quick, hey, these are 10 things to keep in mind. You've been able to develop this now into this book. Would you mind just without unpacking any of them, just reading the 10 strategies, and then I want to come back to one or two of them and unpack
Yeah.
them more deeply.
So hopefully I can remember them all. I'm not
It's all
looking at
right.
the document right now,
Okay.
but curiosity, um, being relentlessly curious, uh, being relational,
Mhm.
being vulnerable, being more focused on learning than on teaching, being strategic with your delegation, and how you utilize staff.
Mhm.
Um, Being committed to moving barriers for teachers, um, being intentional. Instructional leadership doesn't happen by accident. You make it, you're intentional about what your focus is and what you want the focus of teachers to be. Being committed to the right culture. Like, we know teaching and learning doesn't happen in a vacuum. Like, I know there's a gazillion books written on culture. That's the last chapter of the book, and what I wanted to highlight is that you can create the right culture for instructional leadership to happen, for your teachers and your students to thrive. Um, is that 10? Did I get all 10? Or am
I
I
think
missing
you
one?
you you got at least 9 of 10, and I'm not gonna put you on the spot to try to come
Okay.
up with the 10th one, Danny, because I know you're doing this from memory, but I love all of those. So let's come back because curiosity, building relationships, vulnerability, learning, not teaching, strategies for delegation. So let me circle back because we've talked a little bit about relationships as that foundational piece. Let's talk a little bit about why you use that phrase, learning, not just teaching. And I know for people that have um, been a part of some of Solution Tree's work around professional learning communities, this may not be new for them, but I think it's such a great place to revisit. Why, for you, is so important as an instructional leader to help your teachers see the difference between the power of learning versus the power of teaching?
Before I get to that, and I'll respond to that, I thought of the one I was missing. And ironically, the one I was missing is the one that's sort of the most instructional leadershipy. Um, and it is about creating opportunities for your teachers to grow.
Mm,
And I do that, I take two angles. One is create opportunities for teachers to learn from each other. The other is create opportunities for teachers to grow through the dialogue you have with them in a way that promotes self-reflection. And that's a real important piece that's really explicitly about growing teachers, which is kind of the heart and soul of what people think of with instructional leadership. So
mm,
that's the one I missed. But the idea of being more focused on learning than on teaching, it's it's easy when a principal walks into a classroom to sort of hone in on what the teacher's doing, and that's natural, and teachers are great at what they're doing, and they can be entertaining and dynamic and charismatic, creative, innovative, all that stuff. But where the rubber meets the road is, are the students learning?
mhm,
And like, that's obviously the goal of instruction, is for students to learn, for them to grow. And and quite frankly, like, I've heard it said that until something is learned, nothing is taught. And that was almost like a gut punch to me when I first heard it. It can be very, very convicting. Um, that that it doesn't matter kind of how brilliant you think your lesson is or how great your instructional strategy, if it doesn't result in students learning the learning target or whatever that curriculum bit is, then it's for naught. So um, I tell young principals, when you go into a classroom, really be more focused on what the kids are doing than on what the teachers are doing. And so it's about the evidence. And I really, my goal in writing the book was for it not to be heavy, for
mhm.
it not to be overwhelming. And so I personally get turned off by jargon. And educators are just notorious for so much jargon, so many acronyms. And so I had kind of an informal personal goal of trying to write this book without any jargon. But this is the one chapter where I had to use the word data. And someone said, Danny, you know what? If you don't like data, if that's a turnoff, you can use the word evidence. And so I've also started talking about evidence. Um, is is as an instructional leader, it's really important to keep your teachers focused on the evidence that the instruction is working, to
Mm,
look at the data, to find out, are our students, are we moving the needle with student achievement? Are they learning what we want them to learn? And so that evidence, that data could be, it could be standardized tests, it could be common assessments that teachers are administering to their kids. It's an exit slip. It can be an exit slip. So it's just focusing on the results of the instruction. It's easy to be mesmerized and preoccupied with what the teachers are doing, but this chapter is about really honing in on what are the students doing and what are the results that the teaching is getting its desired impact.
That's so practical. Until something is learned, nothing is taught. And so flipping those words from, you know, recognizing how important it is to prioritize the learning, not the teaching. I mean, in essence, Danny, then you actually become a better teacher because the goal isn't what am I conveying? The goal is what are they catching and learning in the process.
Yeah, the best teachers define their success by the success of their students.
Hmm.
They are naturally self-reflective. And in the chapter where I talk about creating opportunities for teachers to grow, I talk about the ways that teachers engage with teacher, the way principals engage with teachers about their lesson. Maybe it's in the post conference, which is a more formal setting, or maybe it's just at the lunch table. But I think a very effective way to do that is to kind of hold up a mirror for teachers. And so it's not about like this top down feedback that principals are giving teachers, because principals are the experts. They might not be the experts, but what great instructional leaders do is they engage in this process that promotes self-reflection with the teachers, asking strategic questions about what the teachers are doing and why they're doing it and what they might do differently, how they're going to assess it, or how they're going to intervene with students that didn't get it the first time. The principal doesn't have to have the answers to those questions, but they promote this process with teachers where teachers are wrestling with it and engaged in it.
Mm. So let's let me take a step back for a second, Danny, because you did this work for a really long time, which means that leaders who do this work for a really long time typically build the capacity in people and the improvement of their systems so that school is the place that you would want every child to be able to show up and flourish in. And so within that context of knowing that all that stuff's important, why did you choose the powerful role of visibility as one of those strategies for instructional leadership?
So, um, you know, uh, there's an acronym I learned in graduate school, MBWA, management by walking around, or management by wandering around.
Hmm.
And all administrators recognize the value from a management perspective of being visible, of walking the halls, of being in the lunchroom, of being at carpool, is, when you walk the halls, you can see if there's a spill in the hallway that needs to get cleaned up. You can see if there's a classroom that's unsupervised because the sub didn't show up. Or sometimes when you're walking around, you come up on some students that are about to get into it and you're able to intervene. So being visible plays an important role in management, obviously. But what I want school leaders to understand and to appreciate is that the walking around, the being visible, also plays an important piece in their leadership, specifically in their instructional leadership, because your presence communicates what you value. And so when you pop into classrooms, when you're visible in classrooms, even if you don't have the wherewithal to provide some feedback, maybe you're only in there for 30 seconds or a minute or two, but your presence, it communicates to the teachers that you care about the work that they're doing, and you appreciate that they're knocking it out of the park as teachers. And your presence communicates to the students that you value their experiences in the classroom and that you care about what they're doing day in and day out. Um, when you're visible in professional learning experiences that teachers are doing, the data meeting or some PD session, you're sitting there with them, you're communicating that that's a priority for you, that you value what they're engaged in, and that process is meaningful. So I think visibility, it really reinforces your priorities as an instructional leader.
I agree. There's a little self-reflection process that I do when I'm working with leaders, sometimes in coaching or in masterminds, and I'll have them just reflect on some statements. What the very first statement is, and I ask them to look back at their past week. And the very first statement is, I have been visible with every student, every teacher, every day. And I know that's the ideal. And there's some days where things get blown up and you're like, man, I didn't get to see anybody today. But when you make visibility the first priority of just staying connected with the people that you're serving, you're right, man. Management becomes a whole different thing when you're able to walk up to a situation before it becomes a situation or manage a situation really quickly in a quick hallway conversation. Um, I know we have leaders listening to this conversation who lead in small school communities, large school communities. Some are solo principals, some are leading teams with 6 APs under them. Why do you also pick as an instructional leader strategy, delegating is winning? Talk about why that's so important for you.
Um, so as a principal, you oftentimes feel inadequate, right? And you just because you feel like you have to be everything to everyone. You're wearing all these hats, and sometimes you're just trying to get through your day. Running around putting out fires. Um, Oftentimes, principals, especially young principals, they really feel responsible for doing it all. For being at every event, for handling everything, and it's just not possible. And you burn out really quickly like that. And so part of delegation is about letting go, and it just frankly it manages you to survive sometimes because you're delegating some tasks. But so tying that to instructional leadership, in part, delegating some of the management stuff, for example, frees you up to go visit classrooms and have conversations with teachers. So it allows you to devote more time to that instructional leadership stuff. Another piece with the delegation is recognizing that you have staff members with amazing expertise in certain areas. So if I'm the principal and I'm attending this big literacy meeting, um, uh, then I'm not an expert in literacy. I'm gonna make sure my literacy guru on staff, I'm gonna get them a sub and make sure they're in that meeting with me. You've got people on your staff, whether it's an assistant principal or teacher leaders, who just have a lot of expertise and they're really good at what they're doing. And so it's about empowering them to help lead their colleagues and valuing what it is that they can contribute because they have some expertise in certain instructional areas that you don't. So it's about letting staff run with what they do well.
So delegation is, in some ways, it's a way to admit I can't do it all. Um, it's letting go of some of those responsibilities that maybe somebody else can manage as well or better in some cases. It's freeing you up to do the things that only you can do. And it's relying on those internal experts because you've got so many people around you that are pretty good at stuff if you just give them permission to do it. Um, why do you think? Because this is a common conversation that I seem to come back to over and over again with leaders. Why do you think newer leaders especially struggle so much with this concept of delegating? And there's a reason you call it delegating is winning. So I'm just why do you think this is a struggle that we keep having to remind people about over and over again?
I think it comes back in part to some insecurity sometimes. Um, Principals want to feel like they're in charge and that they're doing it, and so giving up authority in some ways, it can it can seem threatening because it seems like wait a minute, I'm not the expert. Like um, so like I had an assistant principal at my last school who was really a better instructional leader than me in so many ways. And so it would be easy for me to kind of like, no, I'm the principal, I'm the instructional leader. I really need to lead this PLC, because that makes me feel more like a principal, or it reinforces my esteem as an instructional leader, whatever.
Mhm.
But no, I need to let my AP lead that because she's really gifted at that. So I think it's a lot of insecurity. Um, yeah, I think that's probably the biggest thing.
No, you're so right. I'm thinking of this. and I've seen this in leadership books and analogies in employment, the 80/20 principle that most people spend, um, you know, 80% of their time on tasks or issues that have to be done, but only about 20% of their time on the most urgent, essential things that are going to move the needle going forward. And as a leader, I think sometimes it's helpful to take a step back and ask, where am I spending most of my time? Is it on the 80% over here, or is it on the 20%? And the only way you can ever really focus in on those things that only you can do is if you build the capacity of others to do the things that they could do without you.
Yeah. So at the end of the book, I talk about the fact that none of these strategies work. They don't work in a vacuum. They don't necessarily work in isolation, but they really all complement each other and they work together. So, for example, what you just spoke to is is something that would we I talk about in my chapter on being intentional. Is you're intentional about what your priorities are,
Mhm.
and you're intentional about building in time in your calendar and how you spend that time. And so, uh, yeah, I mean, when I talked about walking around and being visible, not only does that visibility contribute to your instructional leadership because it communicates your values and priorities, but that's also how you lead relationally. You build your relationships with teachers by walking around and being on their turf. And all these things work together, and you can't hardly talk about one without talking about others. So
So let me remind listeners, this is going to be your newest book, which is The Instructional Leader and U10 Strategies for Every School Leader. It's not your first book, Danny. And you have not only authored several other books, but you also present regularly, work with staff, work with teachers, work with other principals in leadership settings. And so I want to come full circle back because what I also want leaders to understand from what you're teaching and coaching as a leader is also something that you have not just owned with your mind, but you've also owned it with your heart. And so take us full circle to some of those things that you like to revisit when you're trying to remember the why of this leadership. And whether that's Danny's why or some of the things that have kept you motivated in your own leadership. But I'm just thinking of that leader right now, middle of the school year, who's looking at all those to-dos and they're like, yeah, man, this is so important. But sometimes I need to refocus on why this is important. So go there with us for a minute, Danny.
well, that sign, I don't know if you can see it above that door there. It says I am the difference. And it was a sign that was above my office door when I was an AP and as a principal. And I tried to cultivate this tradition of students and staff when they left my office, they touched the sign. You know, some did, some didn't.
Mhm.
But to me, that's the ultimate message of empowerment. And it reminds us of the role that we play. Um, I, you know, we get into education because we love kids and we want to make a difference for kids. The hardest lesson I learned as an administrator is when the minute you become an administrator, kind of your new mission is to like win over the adults in the building and make a difference for them. We never stop loving on the students and caring about the students. That's what drives us.
Mhm.
But I've learned over the years to really love and value the teachers and the secretaries and the custodians, the CNP staff. And, you know, people know about as a teacher that proverbial light bulb moment where you're teaching and then the kids' eyes light up, they get it. You know, they understand the concept. And that's like the ultimate rewarding moment for a teacher. Well, as a young administrator, I realized I don't have those light bulb moments, right? Because I'm not teaching the kids. Well, what was pivotal for me is when I learned to redefine my light bulb moments. And so for me as a school leader, the light bulb moment is anytime I could support a staff member, anytime I could make their load a little lighter. And, you know, as a school leader, when you're walking around, if you have your head on a swivel, those moments are everywhere. They're everywhere. Moments to not just support staff, but moments to connect with kids. And and that just never gets old to me. I miss not having those opportunities on a daily basis. But um yeah, so as a school leader, like principals can get burned out, APs can get burned out, but the opposite of being burned out is being fired up. And what fires me up is being mindful of how many opportunities exist every day to make a difference for the staff. And so that's to me that was important.
I love that. Well, Danny, as we wrap up, I want listeners to know how they can stay connected with you, but I also just want you to be able to just leave any other parting words of advice or thoughts that you wanted to share with listeners as they think about their own leadership, as they think about reaching out for this new resource, the instructional leader in you. So how can folks stay connected to you, and what's some parting words of wisdom?
Well, I mean, on X or Twitter, I'm at Steele Thoughts. That's also my Instagram handle. You mentioned my website, leadership learning and culture .com. Uh, I'm also on LinkedIn, and I would love to connect with people there. I couldn't tell you what my whole LinkedIn profile is, but if you look up Danny Steele on LinkedIn, it wouldn't be too hard to find my mug.
Mhm.
Um, I the work of leading a school is hard and it's stressful. There's we talk about emotional labor, like you take it home with you oftentimes, even when you know you shouldn't. You can't help it. So I'm grateful to all those school leaders out there that are in the game and that are fighting the good fight and that are working to support their staff and that are working to make decisions that are good for students, and they keep connecting with kids. And there's so much joy in that. And so I'm grateful for the work that leaders do. And just I would encourage them to keep their head on a swivel, because there's moments to find joy. There's those light bulb moments everywhere in the school every day. And I appreciate the good work that they're doing.
Thank you, Danny. Well, Principal Matters listeners, you can find all of Danny's content at leadershiplearningandculture.com. You can also find him on X and LinkedIn. We'll put notes in our show notes, and you need to pick up a copy of this new book, The Instructional Leader in You, 10 Strategies for Every School Leader. But you also need to reach out to Danny, because Danny is one of those guys who is quick to say, yeah, let's talk. Because there may be something that today that he talked about that resonates with you or your leadership. So if you're looking for opportunities for coaching, for someone to come to speak to your staff for PD, if you're hosting a conference and you're needing someone to come in and motivate, Danny, you live it, brother. The fired up, not burned out, because when you step into a room and you work with other leaders, you always leave that room better. So thank you for your amazing work. And Principal Matters listeners, thank you for doing what matters, and we'll talk to you again soon. Thank you for listening to today's episode of Principal Matters, the School Leaders Podcast. If you enjoyed the show, would you take a moment and like, share, subscribe, or leave us a review? In fact, if you share it out with a friend, even more people can become a part of these conversations. Sign up for our newsletter at williamdparker.com for even more free resources. And don't forget to check out our website to learn more about our books, professional development offerings, Grow Academies, masterminds, executive coaching, and keynote presentations. Wow, let's keep learning together. And thank you for doing what matters.
Principal Matters.